Okay, here we are. We're going to recap season 2 of Stranger Things in anticipation of that 5th and final season, which is coming really soon. If you're not quite feeling up to rewatching that entire series, don't worry, I got you. I'm going to make sure you're feeling well informed going into that 5th and final season. I'm recapping all 4 seasons. I already have that first recap video out. Now we're going to be doing this one, season 2. So get your pen and paper ready and let's dive in. Season 2 introduces us to a lot of new faces, which is something I think is a really cool part of this show. I like how they are constantly keeping things fresh by bringing in these new faces. It helps to, just liven things up a bit. Our new characters this season are Bob, Max, Murray, Billy, and Dr. Owens. So keep your ears peeled because we're going to talk about all of those new characters right now. During season 2, we see that the Upside Down is not done torturing Will, nor is it done torturing Hawkins for that matter. Right in the first episode, while the boys are at the arcade, Will gets into one of his glimpses from the Upside Down, and it's during this glimpse that we are introduced to the season's new main villain, the Mind Flayer, a really scary looking creature that is actually kind of cool looking at the same time. And the name Mind Flayer is yet again another name that the boys pulled out of their D&D books. Now regarding these episodes that Will is having, he actually does tell people about them. He tells his mom, Hopper, and Dr. Owens, who works at Hawkins' lab and is running the place now that Dr. Brenner has died. Or has he? Dr. Owens believes that the visions Will is seeing are most likely brought on by PTSD, and Hopper agrees. Joyce, on the other hand, well, we know how she is. She's a very fiercely protective mom, and who can blame her after what happened to Will in season 1? She's asking questions. It's after Hopper gets called out to look over some rotten pumpkins that he starts to believe that maybe there is something weird going on here with Hawkins, and he becomes convinced that it's all coming from the lab. So after not only finding 2 separate pumpkin patches with rot, but also trees in the forest, he demands that Dr. Owens and the employees at Hawkins' lab go and investigate the areas to make sure that it is in fact not coming from the lab. Dr. Owens at first says, hey, you don't get to give me orders, but Hopper pulls out that big voice that we know he has, and he says, do it. Jumping over to our main kids, we get a couple new additions to Hawkins' school, Max and Billy. They are actually step-siblings, and Billy is a mostly horrible racist bully, but we do find out later in the season that Billy's dad is an abusive asshole, and it seems like he's taking that pain that his dad is pummeling onto him and just spreading the love. That's how it goes a lot of times. Behind every bully, there's another bully. Now, the boys' first introduction to Max is actually in the premiere episode when they see the name Mad Max on the leaderboard at the arcade on a game called Dig Dug. Dustin had previously held that high score, and after Lucas and Dustin figure out that it's her, that she is Mad Max, they both seem pretty interested in her, and we get almost a little competition going between these two as to who's going to win the prize. Mike, on the other hand, does not want a new girl in the party. He wants 11 back in his life, so he treats Max pretty shitty for most of this season. Speaking of 11, at the end of season 1, we saw her fight that Demogorgon, and during that fight, her and the Demogorgon both vanish. Well, it turns out that she basically teleported herself to the Upside Down, and actually she doesn't stay there very long. She leaves, escapes through the doorway not too long after the events of season 1, but when she goes to Mike's house, she sees that there is a bunch of authorities there from Hawkins and decides not to reinsert herself into his life because of all the trouble she had already caused. This leads to her living in the woods like a nomad, and she is eventually found by Hopper, who takes her in and lets her live in his really small, crummy looking shack that is full of dust. Hopper and Eleven's relationship is very maternal. Hopper cares a lot about her. I think he sees Sarah in her, and he really wants to protect her, and he's really worried about all those Hawkins employees that are still looking for 11, because they really are. They're still actively trying to find her, so he decides that she needs to stay put. She can't leave the house. And he says eventually you're going to be able to leave and you're going to be able to go see Mike, but 11 gets really sick of this. She gets really sick of the maybe later, and she eventually has a big fight with Hopper. Another new character that we meet this season is Bob, played by Goonies and Lord of the Rings star Sean Astin. Bob is dating Will's mom this season, and he considers himself to be quite the tech mind. In fact, his nickname is Bob the Brain. Bob, while driving Will to school, tells Will that he too used to suffer from nightmares and that he had a nightmare with a really creepy guy who would come every night and harass him, but he stood up to that bully in the nightmare and said, "Go away!" And Will takes this advice and tries to apply it to his own situation with the Mind Flayer, but instead of the Mind Flayer going away, the Mind Flayer ends up taking over Will's body and possessing him. I know Bob had good intentions, but he kind of screwed Will over here. We need to talk about Dart. Dart is a baby demo dog that Dustin finds and decides to keep in his home. He even tells the gang about this and says that he thinks he might have discovered a brand new species because because at first it's not abundantly clear that Dart is a demo dog. However, it does become more clear after Dart eats Dustin's cat and starts having that 4-piece mouth that we all know the Demogorgon has. So they decide Demogorgon, dog, demo dog. Dustin and Steve eventually team up to try to capture and possibly kill Dart after Dustin discovers that his pet has grown in size and is looking very much like a Demogorgon. But we'll get back to that. Now, catching up with Lucas, he and Max end up forming a pretty solid bond, and he does eventually tell Max about the events of season 1, a story that she doesn't believe in the slightest until later on when she comes face to face with a Demogorgon during Dustin and Steve's half-baked attempt to eliminate Dart. After Will's possession, he starts having an adverse reaction to heat. He does not like it hot at all, and that's because the Mind Flayer, of course, does not like heat. And he tells his mom and Hopper that he is seeing visions of something evil that is spreading, and after being given a shit ton of paper, Will draws out a large tunnel system, and Hopper drives to those tunnels and discovers that the gate, the one way over at Hawkins' lab, has indeed been spreading. Hopper ends up getting stuck down there, and it is Will who has a vision that realizes that Hopper is in fact trapped in these tunnels. This leads to Bob's brain moment where he realizes that this giant map system that Will has drawn out, all these vines or whatever is going on, he realizes that this is actually a map of Hawkins, and he is able to pinpoint exactly where Hopper is in this map system, which leads to Joyce, Will, Mike, and Bob all going to the scene to try to rescue Hopper, who is not doing good. They do end up rescuing Hopper, and while they are there, they get intercepted by some of the Hawkins lab employees who are there to try to control the situation. They start burning the tendrils down in these tunnels, which leads to Will basically glitching out. Let's quickly explain the burn. Earlier in the season, we see Dr. Owens mention that they had been burning the gate in the bottom of Hawkins' lab in order to prevent it from spreading, something that at some point must have stopped working because they missed a whole bunch of spreading and a massive tunnel system that was going on beneath Hawkins' feet. Anyways, the Mind Flayer does not like that they burnt those tendrils, and he makes Will lead some of these Hawkins employees into a certain section of the tunnel so he can basically trap them and kill them. We're making pretty good progress here, but I really want to stop and talk about Nancy, Steve, and Jonathan because there's shit going on with them too that is all really, really interesting. Nancy and Steve have been continuing to visit with Barb's parents because Nancy's feeling a huge amount of guilt over the demise of her friend, and her guilt leads to a drunken rant at a party where she basically confirms to Steve that, yeah, she doesn't love him, she likes someone else, I guess. Nancy eventually decides that she wants to tell Barb's parents the truth about what really happened, and when she and Jonathan attempt to meet up with Barb's mother at a park, they are intercepted by some of the Hawkins employees, which leads to them being brought to the lab and introduced to Dr. Owens. Nancy ends up recording a conversation with Dr. Owens that she believes will be incriminating and tries to team up with Murray to get the story out and expose Hawkins' lab for the dirty, corrupt stuff that they're doing. Now, Murray is a really, really fun character that we get to meet in this season. And this whole side quest that we have with Nancy and Jonathan not only expands Murray's role, but also eventually leads to Nancy and Jonathan becoming an item.
So, Jonathan, how was the pullout?
Switching gears back to 11, she manages to track down her mom, and while having a conversation with her mom, who we know is very debilitated, she finds out about a young girl who was at Hawkins' lab with her, a girl named Callie. This leads to 11 tracking down Callie, and it's in this episode that 11 learns how to unlock more of her powers, as well as learns when it's okay to take a life and when it's not. Now this episode, the episode The Lost Sister, gets a lot of bad feedback from people. As a matter of fact, I think people tend to put Stranger Things Season 2 lower just because of this one episode, which I think is absolutely ridiculous and silly because this episode, even if it hasn't come back yet, there was reasons for it. Things do happen in this episode that translate and move forward. Now, using 11's powers, Callie is basically able to track down another Hawkins employee with the intent of getting revenge against this guy, killing him. But 11 decides no, she decides not to do it, and she even stops Callie from doing it, which really makes Callie mad. It's at this moment that 11 realizes, I've got to go back. I found out that Hawkins is in danger, my friends are in trouble, and I don't think this is gonna work. At Hawkins' lab, we see that yes, Will has led those soldiers into a trap in the tunnel system, and the demo dogs, which were previously attacking Dustin, Steve, Lucas, and Max at the bus, all head to the tunnels to kill the soldiers, and then they start attacking the lab. This is where we get Bob's heroic sacrifice. Poor Bob. After escaping the lab, everyone reunites back at the buyer's house and they attempt to see if Will is indeed still inside this body or if he's totally gone. They come up with the idea of questioning Will in a way that'll make it so that he can't track down where they are, because if Will knows where they are, he's going to send those demo dogs after them. So they take him out to the shed, they make the shed look totally blank, and they start to question him. And then they find out that Will is in fact in there and he is trying to communicate with them using Morse code with his fingers. He basically tells them they need to close the gate. But eventually a phone rings and Will realizes exactly where he is and sends those demo dogs there, which ends up leading to a really awesome reveal as 11 comes and saves the day. The moment when Mike and 11 see each other, I swear this was such a powerful moment. As a matter of fact, just all of them seeing 11, because they all thought that she was dead. It was a really, really special moment. And Mike, as you can understand, is pretty pissed at Harbour for keeping 11's existence alive. He had been grieving her, missing her, communicating with her every day, using his microphone or his radio, trying to reach out to her, hoping for any side that she was alive, and she was never allowed to communicate because Harbour wouldn't allow it. So yeah, Mike is pretty mad at Harbour. A plan is eventually formed, and Harbour and 11 head to the lab to close that gate. Dustin, Lucas, Mike, and Max all come up with a different plan. Their plan is to help clear out the lab so that 11 can get through safely, and their idea is to do what the soldiers did in those tunnels, burn those vines, because if those vines get burned, the Mind Flayer is going to send those demo dogs to defend the mines. Back at Hopper's house, Joyce, Jonathan, and Nancy all try to get the Mind Flayer to leave Will's body, and they realize that instead of letting the Mind Flayer have these cool conditions that he or it wants, let's turn up the heat. They heat up this house really, really hot. They even poke Will with a hot metal prod, and eventually the Mind Flayer does leave Will's mouth and fly out into the distance. Jonathan then sends the okay to Harbour that yes, you can go ahead and close the gate. Now the reason they had to wait for this sequence of events is because we have established that Will has a hive mind connection to the Mind Flayer and to the demo dogs and to these vines, and if they close that gate while Will is still possessed by the Mind Flayer, it's going to kill not only the demo dogs, but it's also going to kill Will. So they had to get the Mind Flayer out of Will before 11 can close that gate, but eventually they do end up closing that gate, and 11 channels those brand new improved powers that she got during the Lost Sister episode that everyone hates, and she's able to successfully close that gate. In the end of the episode, we see that Murray has taken that recording he got from Nancy and exposed Hawkins' lab, and Hawkins' lab ends up clearing out, and it looks like they won against these scummy bad guys. We also get a really cute / sad scene at a school dance, and the season ends with a really ominous view of the Upside Down. We pan out from the school and we see the camera start to twist, and we see the upside down version of Hawkins' school, and the Mind Flayer is there looking down, basically saying, I'm still watching Will and I'm still watching Hawkins. So that's the biggest moments from season 2. That's everything I can think of that's going to be super important. I think I covered everything. If I missed anything, it's nothing super critical. Smaller subplots here and there. It's hard to describe every single thing about the season in a smaller video, but that is everything that I can think of for season 2. I think you should be feeling pretty prepared with that now. Next, we're going to jump over and we're going to do that season 3 recap, so stick around and look out for that video. That'll be coming quite soon. If you liked this video, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you want to hear more things from me, subscribe to this channel. Later.